My husband sold my $2 million Texas ranch to his new girlfriend for $5. He thought I'd break down, cry, and just walk away with my tail between my legs. He had no idea I'd just smile. He had no clue what I'd already set in motion long before he made his boneheaded move. See, sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's the sound of a woman who's already won. Michelle cornered me in the parking lot of the feed store, waving a stack of papers around like they were victory flags at the Indy 500. "Just wanted to thank you for the ranch," she said, her voice loud enough for a couple of other ranchers loading up their trucks to hear. $5 was more than generous. She held up the deed transfer, my forged signature scrawled across the bottom like a child's crayon drawing. Sean, my husband, sat in her gleaming white Mercedes, refusing to meet my eyes through the tinted glass. I kept loading 50-pound bags of grain into the bed of my Ford F-150, each lift steady and controlled, while she prattled on about her grand plans for my land. The owner of the feed store, a good old boy named George, watched from his doorway, pure confusion written all over his weathered face. "Going to convert those old stables into a yoga studio," Michelle continued, her voice echoing across the gravel lot. "Sean says you won't mind clearing out by Monday." Before we continue, if you believe that hardworking people deserve to protect what they've built with their own two hands, please consider subscribing. It's free, and it helps us get these stories out to others who need to hear them. Monday. She was giving me 3 days to pack up and leave the ranch I'd built from nothing. I hauled another grain bag onto the truck, the familiar weight grounding me while my mind kicked into overdrive. The signature on her papers looked like someone had tried to trace my name with their left hand during an earthquake. After 20 years of signing breeding certificates, vet forms, and supply orders, you'd think Sean would know what my actual signature looked like. The man was a fool. George Murphy stepped out from his doorway, walking toward us slowly. He'd sold me my first bag of feed when I was 25, fresh from my father's funeral, using his life insurance money to buy 2,300 acres of Texas scrubland everyone swore was worthless. "Everything all right here, Jane?" His eyes darted between Michelle's smug grin and my steady, deliberate movements. "Just fine, George." I positioned another bag, the rough burlap a familiar comfort under my work gloves. Michelle here was just explaining how she bought my ranch. "Bought?" George's face creased with doubt. "But you just ordered all your winter supplies." $5, Michelle interrupted, shoving the papers toward him. "Legal and binding. Sean handled everything." That's when I saw Sean's hand on the Mercedes door handle, like he was thinking about getting out, then decided against it. 18 years of marriage, and he couldn't even face me while he was trying to steal everything I'd ever worked for. The cowardice somehow hurt even more than the betrayal. Michelle's phone rang. She answered with a giggle that belonged on a high school cheerleader, not a 40-year-old woman. "Yes, baby, I'm telling her now." She held the phone out toward me. "Sean wants to talk to you." I took my sweet time walking over to my truck's tailgate, closing it with a careful, deliberate thud. "Tell him he knows where to find me." The last grain bag loaded, I climbed into my truck without a single look back. In the rearview mirror, I saw George examining the papers Michelle had pushed at him, his expression morphing from confusion to pure disgust. He'd been in business long enough to recognize a piece of garbage when he saw it. The drive back to the ranch took 12 minutes. I'd made this trip so many times I could navigate it with my eyes closed. Past the Henderson place where their new foal was learning to run, around the bend where lightning had split that massive live oak 5 summers ago, and up the hill that overlooked the valley, I'd spent 2 decades transforming from neglected land into something beautiful. My ranch manager Queen's truck was parked by the barn when I pulled in. She'd been with me for 12 years and had instincts sharper than any horse I owned. She came out of the barn holding a clipboard, but her eyes were locked on my face. "Jane," she said. Just my name, but the way she said it was a question. Michelle cornered me at the feed store. She claimed she bought the ranch for $5. Queen's expression didn't flicker, but her knuckles went white on the clipboard. "That explains Sean loading his things into a U-Haul this morning. Thought you knew." This morning, while I was out in the back pasture training the yearlings. He'd been packing up, planning his great escape while I was working the horses, totally clueless that my world was being dismantled box by box. "Show me," I said. We walked to the house, my house, built with my hands and my father's insurance money. The office door was wide open. His desk drawers were empty, the file cabinet ransacked. But Sean was a world-class idiot if he thought I kept the important papers in the most obvious places. Queen followed me to the kitchen. I reached behind the refrigerator and pulled out an old coffee tin wrapped in plastic. Inside were the real documents, the original deed in my name alone, the receipts from every single improvement, the breeding records that proved the world-class bloodlines I'd developed, and something else. A hotel receipt from 3 weeks ago I'd found in Sean's jacket, the Driscoll Hotel in Austin. Champagne, room service for 2, with a little handwritten note. Can't wait for our new beginning. M. You knew? Queen asked, looking at the receipt. I suspected. Found this when he claimed to be at the Dallas cattle auction. I folded it carefully and put it back in the tin. But suspicion and proof are 2 different things. My phone buzzed. Margaret, Sean's sister, calling for the 3rd time this week. I'd been ignoring her, but now, I answered. Jane, thank God. Her voice was strained. I've been trying to warn you. Sean's been asking me all these questions about property law, about how to transfer deeds. He thinks because you let him handle the taxes, he has some kind of claim. I told him that's not how it works here in Texas, but he and that woman Michelle filed something at the courthouse. There was a long pause. Jane, you need a lawyer. Right now. After she hung up, I just sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd served Sean breakfast this morning, completely unaware he was planning to steal my entire life by lunchtime. Queen sat across from me, a silent, solid presence. Denzel Washington, I said finally. Not the actor, of course. My lawyer. He handled my father's estate, helped me buy this place. His number's in the tin, too. While Queen called Denzel, I walked through my house, seeing it with new eyes. The walls I'd painted, the hardwood floors I'd refinished, the windows I'd replaced one by one as I could afford it. In the living room hung our wedding photo, both of us so young, so hopeful, standing in front of the old barn before I'd rebuilt it. Sean's smile looked genuine back then. When did it turn into a performance? Denzel could see me tomorrow afternoon. Until then, I had horses to feed, stalls to clean, and a ranch to run. Whatever Sean and Michelle thought they'd accomplished with their $5 fantasy, the real work didn't stop. It never had, not through drought or flash floods or market crashes. It damn sure wouldn't stop now. That evening, I stood in Midnight Star's stall, checking on our pregnant mare. She'd been restless for 3 days, showing all the signs of a difficult pregnancy up ahead. I ran my hands along her sides, feeling the full shift within her. Life went on, preparing to enter the world regardless of pathetic human drama. We're going to be fine, I told her, though I wasn't sure which of us I was trying to convince. I've built this place once from nothing. If I have to, I'll fight to keep it. The mare nuzzled my shoulder, her breath warm against my neck. Outside, the sun set over the pastures I'd seeded, the fences I'd mended, and a dream some fool thought he could steal for the price of a cup of coffee. The next day started with the ordinary sounds of my life. The coffee maker gurgling its last few drops, bacon sizzling in the cast-iron skillet my mother had seasoned for 40 years. I was slicing tomatoes from the garden when I heard the sound of Sean's dress shoes on the hardwood floors instead of his usual scuffed work boots. He stood in the kitchen doorway wearing his charcoal suit, the one he reserved for funerals and bank meetings. "We need to talk," he said. He didn't move toward the coffee pot like he had every other morning for the last 18 years. No kiss on my cheek, no complaint about the Texas heat, not one question about which horse needed looking at. I just kept slicing the tomato, the knife moving through the red flesh with practiced, steady precision. "Your breakfast is almost ready." "I won't be staying for breakfast." He pulled out his usual chair but stayed standing behind it, gripping the back like it was a podium. "I'm leaving you, Jane. For Michelle." The name wasn't a shock. I'd seen it on that hotel receipt, heard him whisper it in his sleep. But the next words were, "The ranch is already sold. $5. Filed yesterday at the county courthouse." He slid a set of papers across the table, avoiding the wet ring from my coffee mug. The documents looked official enough. County seal, notary stamp, all the fancy decorations of legitimacy. But the signature that was supposed to be mine looked like someone trying to forge a check while riding a mechanical bull at Gillies. "You can't sell what isn't yours, Sean." "It's done. Community property laws. My name's on the tax documents." I turned off the stove and moved the bacon to a plate lined with paper towels. Just ordinary everyday movements, while my mind cataloged 20 years of paperwork he'd never once bothered to actually read. The deed, in my name alone, the inheritance laws that protected what I'd bought with my father's money long before he was in the picture, the countless hours of labor I documented building this place before we'd even met. When did you plan this? My voice stayed level, almost professional. Does it matter? Michelle's coming by to look at her property. You should pack. That's when we heard the quiet purr of the Mercedes pulling up the gravel drive. Its engine was too quiet for ranch country, where trucks announced themselves with an honest, rumbling noise. Through the window, I watched Michelle step out like she was arriving at a photo shoot in downtown Dallas. Cream-colored pants that would last about 30 seconds in a real barn, high heels that were already sinking into the gravel I'd spread myself last spring, a silk scarf that probably cost more than most people's mortgage payments. She walked right through my front door without even knocking. "Oh, good. You're both here." She surveyed my kitchen like she was an appraiser, her nose wrinkling just a little at the smell of bacon. "I want to see everything, starting with the master bedroom." I just stayed at the counter, watching this woman navigate my home in shoes meant for marble floors. "The bedroom's upstairs," I said flatly. "Mind the third step. It creaks." "We'll be fixing that," she announced, already heading up. "This whole place needs updating. Sean, honey, come show me our closet." Our closet? He followed her up the stairs like a lost puppy while I stood in my kitchen, listening to her heels clicking overhead, marking her territory in rooms where I'd nursed him through pneumonia, held him after his father died, and celebrated the good years before they all went sour. This is just sickening. If watching this woman plan to destroy Jane's life's work in her own kitchen makes your blood boil, you know what to do. Subscribe right now. It's for every person who's ever been underestimated. If you're not subscribing, head to the comments and tell me why you think it's okay for them to just take everything. Queen appeared at the back door, taking in the whole disgusting scene with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Saw the Mercedes. Everything okay?" "Sean sold the ranch to his girlfriend for $5. She pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. "Denzel?" "No. Meeting him tomorrow. I'm texting him now. Emergency basis." She kept typing while Michelle's voice drifted down from upstairs, planning to tear out the bathroom I had retiled by hand, wanting to install something more contemporary. They came back down 15 minutes later, Michelle chattering about paint colors while Sean carried her stupidly expensive purse. "We'll need you out by the end of the week," she told me, like she was discussing a dinner reservation. "Sean says you have somewhere to go." "Sean says a lot of things," I said. Queen stepped forward, all 5'4" of her radiating the quiet threat of someone who'd faced down charging bulls. "The horses need tending. You planning to learn how to do that?" Michelle just laughed, a tinkling fake sound that belonged in some cocktail lounge in Austin. "Oh, we're selling those beasts, converting the stables to an event space. Much more profitable." Those beasts. The bloodlines I had spent 2 decades developing. Horses whose genealogies I could recite like my own family tree, because they were my family. "We're going to town," Sean announced, his hand on Michelle's back, "to introduce her to everyone." They left in her Mercedes, kicking up dust all over the porch I'd swept just yesterday. Queen and I stood in the sudden, surreal silence. "Those papers won't hold up," she said. "I know," I replied, "but the damage he's doing around town, that'll be his to live with." By 11 a.m., my phone started ringing off the hook. First, Martha Henderson, whose property bordered mine. "Honey, is it true? George Murphy just called saying Sean's at the store with some woman claiming she owns your place." Then, Ben Williams from the bank. "Jane, there's some confusion here about a property transfer. Can you come in?" Finally, old Doc Miller, our vet. "Just had the strangest encounter with Sean and some blonde woman. They're telling everyone you're having some kind of breakdown. What's really going on?" Each call was a small, sharp humiliation, my private catastrophe becoming public entertainment. But the worst was yet to come. My phone screen lit up with Ashley's face, my daughter, away at college, the one pure and good thing Sean and I had created together. Her voice was thick with tears before I could even say hello. "Mom, what are you doing?" No greeting, just a raw accusation. "Dad called. He says you're trying to destroy his happiness, that you won't accept the divorce, that you're making up lies about the ranch." Each word was a separate wound. Sean had gotten to her first, painted his own twisted picture on a blank canvas. "He says You're having some kind of breakdown, that he's worried about you, but you won't get help. Ashley, none of that is true. Then why is he saying it? Why would he lie? Because that's what he does now, I wanted to scream. But poisoning my daughter against her own father, even a father doing this, just wasn't my way. Come home this weekend. I'll show you everything. I have a study group. Please. The word cracked, showing more vulnerability than I'd intended. Just come home. Let me explain in person. There was a long pause, stretched thin across miles of wire and doubt. But Mom, if you're really having problems, you need to admit it. Get help. He's not just stealing her ranch, he's stealing her daughter. It's the ultimate betrayal. If you've ever felt alone or had your own family turned against you, join our community by subscribing. Let's show Jane she's not alone. This is the part where most people would just feel helpless. But you can actually do something. Hit subscribe. After she hung up, I sat at the table where I'd served thousands of meals, helped with homework, and celebrated birthdays. The bacon had gone cold, the grease congealing white on the plate. Through the window, I could see the horses in the pasture, unaware their fate was being debated in town by people who thought of them as nothing more than beasts. Queen placed a cup of fresh coffee in front of me. She'll understand when she sees the truth. Will she? Her father's version is simpler. Mom went crazy is a lot easier to believe than Dad committed fraud. Kids figure out their parents eventually, Queen said. Truth has a way of coming out. I hope to God she was right. But for now, I had a ranch to run, horses to tend, and a life to protect from people who thought they could buy it for pocket change. The morning had shattered plenty, but I was still standing in the pieces, figuring out how to reassemble them into something stronger. The credit card statement arrived buried in Thursday's mail, tucked between feed store flyers and auction notices. I almost tossed it unopened. Sean handled our personal finances while I managed the ranch accounts, but his name on a charge from Lock It Up Storage stopped me cold. A monthly charge for the last 6 months. Unit 47B. I drove there that afternoon, telling Queen I needed to pick up supplies from town. The facility sat on the outskirts of town, rows of identical orange doors baking in the hot Texas sun. The manager, a kid barely out of high school, recognized me from the ranch's community outreach program. Mrs. Brennan, you here to check on your husband's unit? I lost my key, I lied, as smooth as butter. He cut the lock for me without a single question, probably violating 10 different company policies. The metal door rolled up with a groan to reveal Sean's secret archive. Banker's boxes, labeled in his blocky handwriting. I pulled out the first one, my hands steady. Inside were our breeding records, but the sales figures were all wrong. Thunder's Pride's offspring, which sold for $50,000, was listed as $15,000. Documentation for bloodlines I'd developed over decades, all with cooked numbers. A second set of books for the ranch accounts, showing massive losses where I knew we'd made a healthy profit. Then I found the letters. Michelle's handwriting was flowery, almost childish. 2 years of correspondence. 2 years I'd been too busy, or maybe just too trusting, to notice. Can't wait until we can stop pretending, one read. That Kentucky Derby party plan is perfect. Get her drunk. Get her signature. Then we're free. The Derby party. 2 years ago. Sean had been so attentive that night, constantly refilling my wine glass, insisting I relax for once. I'd woken up with the worst hangover of my life and no memory of signing a single thing. Now I understood why he'd been so pleased with himself that night. I photographed every document, every letter, every falsified record. My phone's storage filled up as the evidence mounted, years of deception, all documented in Sean's own handwriting. The last box held receipts for jewelry I'd never received, charges for vacations he'd taken without me, and restaurant bills from dates he'd had while I was home working late. Back at the ranch, Queen was waiting in the barn office, her expression carved from stone. "We need to talk," she said, closing the door behind me. "I should have told you sooner." She pulled out a folder she'd hidden in the supply cabinet. 3 months ago, Sean met with Jack Morrison about buying Thunder's Pride, said you'd agreed to sell, but you were too emotional to handle the negotiations. Thunder's Pride. Our foundation stallion, whose bloodline I'd spent 15 years perfecting. I told Morrison you'd never sell. He backed off. But then Sean started approaching collectors for breeding documentation, claiming horses had died or been traded. She spread papers across the desk, copies of emails, falsified death certificates, forged sales agreements. I've been documenting everything, making copies before he could destroy the originals. Why didn't you tell me? I kept hoping I was wrong, that there was some logical explanation. Her voice cracked just a little. You seemed happy. I didn't want to be the one who... You protected the ranch. That's what matters. Together we traced the money trail. Phantom vet bills for procedures that never happened, medications never purchased. Doc Miller's signature forged dozens of times. The total was approaching $400,000 over 3 years. There's more, Queen said quietly. Last month, while you were at the Breeders' Conference in Kentucky, Michelle was here. In your house. I have security footage from the barn cameras. That night, unable to sleep, I remembered something. The cloud storage account I'd set up years ago for ranch documents, back when Sean claimed he wanted to help more with the business. He'd forgotten I still had administrator access. I opened my laptop at 2 a.m., logging into the account with credentials he'd never bothered to change. Their text messages, synced automatically from his phone. 2 years of their entire sordid conversation sprawled out before me. She actually thinks I'm working late, Sean had written. So pathetic. The stupid cow probably doesn't even know what the ranch is really worth, Michelle replied. Every plan was detailed. Every lie was celebrated. They mocked my morning routines, my dedication to the horses, my trust in the man I'd married. There were photos of them together at restaurants I thought he'd visited with clients, pictures from a vacation in Cabo during what he'd called a business conference. Then I found it, a photo that knocked the breath right out of my lungs. Them, together, in my bed, on my grandmother's quilt, taken while I was at the Kentucky Horse Show last spring. Michelle's caption read, "Her bed is more comfortable than mine." I ran to the bathroom, emptying my stomach until there was nothing left but bile and pure white-hot rage. This wasn't just betrayal, it was the desecration of every sacred space I'd built in my life. My lawyer, Denzel, answered his phone at 6 a.m., his voice alert despite the hour. "Jane, I've been reviewing the documents Queen sent over. There's something you need to know." We met at his office in Austin within the hour. He'd pulled the county records dating back to my initial purchase of the ranch. The deed is entirely in your name. Your father's life insurance paid for it before you even married Sean. His name is on the tax documents for filing purposes only. He has zero legal claim to the property itself. Then Denzel pulled out another folder. Remember that derby party 2 years ago? That party again? Vaguely. I drank way too much. Sean had you sign something that night, right? He probably thought it was a power of attorney or a property transfer. Denzel allowed himself a grim smile. But you signed a post-nuptial agreement I had prepared for you months earlier and left in your desk. It states that in the event of a divorce, the ranch and all its assets remain solely yours. I don't remember signing that. Doesn't matter, it's legal. Filed and ironclad. Sean signed it too, probably thinking it was something else after a few mint juleps. He pulled out the document. Both our signatures were clear despite being a little wavy. He accidentally protected you from himself. What about all the money he stole? We'll file liens against the property for unpaid labor, 20 years of ranch development at market rates. Between that and the embezzlement, we're looking at about $1.8 million in claims. Even if his fake sale was legal, which it isn't, the liens would prevent any transfer. I sat there in Denzel's big leather chair, surrounded by a mountain of evidence of a betrayal so complete it should have destroyed me. But instead, I felt something else. Clarity. Every suspicious moment, every gut instinct I'd suppressed, every lame excuse I'd made for Sean's behavior, they had all been warning signs I'd chosen to ignore. File everything, I told Denzel. Every lien, every charge, every single piece of paper that protects what I built. This could get ugly, Jane. Criminal charges. It's already ugly, I said. Now we make it legal. Queen was feeding the horses when I got back. She looked up from Thunder's Pride's stall, the very stallion Sean had tried to sell behind my back. How bad? She asked. 2 years of planning, I said. $400,000 stolen. Photos of them in my bed. She absorbed this, then went back to brushing the stallion with steady, even strokes. But the ranch was never his to sell. The stallion nickered softly, and in that moment I realized something. While Sean and Michelle had been scheming and stealing, I'd been building something real. Every foal, every improved acre, every young rider I'd taught, that was my true fortune. And no $5 deed, no matter how many times they filed it, could ever steal what was already truly mine. The next morning, I woke up at 4:30 a.m., same as always. I made coffee in the same pot I'd used for 20 years and started my rounds like absolutely nothing had changed. The horses needed feeding, whether my world was falling apart or not. Sean found me in the barn, mucking out stalls with the easy rhythm of someone who'd done it 10,000 times before. "You're taking this well," he said, a note of suspicion creeping into his voice. I just kept shoveling. "Taking what?" "Well, the sale, the divorce, everything. Life goes on, Sean. Horses still need to be cared for." He watched me work for a few minutes, probably expecting tears or a screaming fit, or maybe even begging. Instead, I just whistled softly, the same tune I always used to calm down the nervous yearlings. By the third stall, he walked away, clearly unnerved by my complete and total normalcy. That afternoon, Denzel's investigator, a quiet man named David Park, arrived disguised as a potential student for riding lessons. While I showed him around the arena, he planted recording devices, each one smaller than a button, in the kitchen, the living room, and the office. "Perfectly legal in our state for a property owner protecting against fraud," he'd said. "Just act completely normal. Let them hang themselves with their own words." So I did. I packed Sean's lunch each morning, turkey sandwich with the crusts cut off just the way he liked it. I washed his clothes, folded them precisely, even ironed his shirts, even though I knew he was wearing them to go see Michelle. The familiar domestic routines became a performance, and I played my part to perfection. Thursday evening, Sean brought Michelle to dinner, in my house, at my table. "Hope you don't mind," he said, though it was obvious he couldn't care less. Michelle wanted to see the kitchen in the evening light. I served pot roast, the recipe his own mother had taught me. I set the table with the everyday plates, not the good china. That would seem bitter. I poured water for everyone, keeping my movements steady and calm. Michelle talked through the entire meal about her renovation plans while sitting in the very chair where my daughter Ashley had done her homework for 12 years. "We're thinking marble countertops," she announced, gesturing at my worn butcher block that had seen 2 decades of family meals, "and definitely removing that wall for an open concept." "Interesting choice," I replied, passing her the potatoes. Sean watched me carefully, looking for any cracks in my composure. Finding none, he grew bolder. "You should be grateful Jane didn't fight the sale," he told Michelle, right there at my table. "She knows she couldn't have managed this place alone anyway." Every single word, recorded by David's tiny devices, every smug admission of their scheme, preserved digitally forever. Friday afternoon, Ashley's car pulled into the drive. I watched from the window as she just sat in her car for a full minute, gathering the courage to face her supposedly unstable mother. When she finally got out, her face was etched with the exhaustion of someone being forced to choose sides. "Mom," she said. Just one word, but it was loaded with doubt. "Your room's ready. I put on fresh sheets." She followed me inside, stiff and formal, like a stranger in her own home. In the kitchen, she set down her bag, studying me for any signs of the breakdown her father had described. "Dad says you're not accepting reality." "Sit down, Ashley." I spread the evidence across the kitchen table methodically. The forged signatures, the bank statements showing the theft, the photos from the storage unit, her father's text messages mocking my stupidity, Michelle's cruel comments about my work with the horses. Ashley's hands started to shake as she read. When she got to the photo of them in my bed, she shoved the papers away and ran to the bathroom. I heard her getting sick, the exact same reaction I'd had. Later, we sat on the porch swing, the one I'd hung up when she was 3 years old. The chains creaked with a familiar rhythm as she leaned her head against my shoulder. "How are you so calm?" she whispered. "You remember when you were 8 and that mare kicked you?" She nodded. "You got right back up, walked back to the barn, and got back on. No crying, no drama. You said the fear would just make the horses nervous." "This is different, Mom." "No, sweetheart, it's not. Patience is what separates trained horses from wild ones. Your father is acting wild right now. I'm staying trained." She was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry I doubted you." "He's your father. You wanted to believe him." By Saturday, the town had clearly chosen sides. At the feed store, half the customers offered me quiet sympathy, while the other half actively avoided eye contact. Martha Henderson whispered loudly to her sister about how some women drive their men away with neglect. Michelle had started an Instagram account, Ranch Life Dreams. It was filled with photos of her posing with my horses, calling them her babies. One caption read, "So blessed to start this new chapter. Country life suits me. The comment section was flooded with congratulations from people who had no idea she'd bought it all for $5. The Wilkins family, who'd been buying horses from me for 15 years, canceled their monthly training session. Just until things settled down, they said, but I knew what they really meant. Drama was bad for business. Only Queen, Doc Miller, and surprisingly George from the feed store stood firmly in my corner. "Known you since you were a kid," George said when I tried to thank him. "I know what you built and who built it." Sunday morning brought Sean's worst escalation yet. I returned from an early morning horse auction to find new locks on my own front door. My key wouldn't turn. "Sean," I called through the door. "My medication is in there. My clothes." "Should have thought about that before being so difficult," he yelled back. "There's a motel in town." He locked her out of her own home. Can you even imagine? This is the moment of truth. Are you the kind of person who just watches injustice happen, or do you stand up? Hitting that subscribe button sends a message. If you can watch this and not feel compelled to support stories of strength like this, I honestly want to hear your reasoning in the comments. Go on, explain it. The barn tack room had an old army cot from back when we'd had a sick horse that needed overnight monitoring. I set it up next to the saddle racks, using horse blankets for bedding. That night, I lay there listening to the horses breathing, their occasional snorts and shifts more comforting than any human conversation could ever be. Queen found me there Monday morning, bringing me coffee and a fresh set of clothes from her truck. "This is insane, Jane. You need to call the police." "No. Denzel says to let them think they're winning. The recorder in the kitchen just caught him admitting he changed the locks to force me out of my legal residence. It's more evidence." She studied my face. "You're playing a longer game, aren't you?" "Sean taught me how to play chess years ago," I said. "He always forgot the most important rule. The queen is the most powerful piece on the board, but she knows when to wait." Michelle arrived that afternoon with a measuring tape and a binder full of fabric samples, waltzing through my house like she owned it while I watched from the barn door. She held curtain swatches up to my windows and planned where her precious yoga studio would go. Sean stood behind her, his hands on her waist, performing happiness for my benefit. They thought they'd won. They thought my silence meant I had surrendered. They couldn't see the trap closing in, couldn't hear the recordings accumulating, and they couldn't possibly imagine that a woman who'd built a ranch from nothing might just know a thing or two about how to protect it. That night, in the tack room, surrounded by the smell of leather and hay, I smiled in the darkness. The storm was coming, but I was already in the shelter. They were the ones standing out in the open, too arrogant to even notice the clouds building on the horizon. The scream that tore through the barn at 2 a.m. wasn't human. It was Midnight Star, and I knew that sound. It was the sound of a mare in serious trouble. I stumbled from my cot in the tack room, my back aching from the canvas, and found her down in her stall, her sides heaving with contractions that were going nowhere. "Easy, girl, easy." I ran my hands along her swollen belly, feeling for the foal's position. It was wrong. Everything was wrong. The baby was turned, maybe tangled. I grabbed my phone to call Doc Miller and then remembered. No service. Sean had suspended my line yesterday. Queen's number was programmed into the barn's landline. She answered on the second ring, wide awake despite the hour. "Midnight's in trouble. Bad presentation." "Calling Doc now," she said, and hung up. The next 20 minutes felt like hours. Midnight Star's eyes rolled white with pain, her legs thrashing against the stall walls. I held her head, singing the lullaby Ashley had loved as a baby, trying to keep both of us calm. Doc Miller arrived with Queen right behind him. He took one look and started pulling equipment from his truck. "Foal's got a leg back. We need to move fast." "I'll cover the bill," Queen said quietly, pulling out her credit card before Doc could even ask about payment. We both knew what Sean had done to my bank accounts. For the next 2 hours, we worked in that ancient dance of birth and possible death. Doc's arms disappeared inside the mare, trying to manipulate the foal, while I held Midnight steady and Queen managed the equipment. The barn filled with the sounds of labor, heavy breathing, pained groans, the constant rustle of straw. "Got it," Doc finally said. "Legs are forward. Here we go." The foal emerged in a sudden rush of fluid and motion, a black colt, perfect except for one white sock on his left rear leg. He lay still for a terrifying moment, then shuddered to life, lifting his impossible head on that impossibly thin neck. "There you go," I whispered, clearing the mucus from his nostrils. Welcome to the world, little one. Midnight Star turned to inspect her baby, nickering softly. Within an hour, the colt was standing on legs that looked like stilts, already searching for milk. As I watched him take those first wobbly steps, the thought hit me like a punch to the gut. This might be the last foal born here under my watch. Don't think like that, Queen said, reading my face. This place is yours, for now. Tuesday brought an unexpected visitor. James Whitman from First National Bank stood at the barn entrance, looking deeply uncomfortable in his suit and shiny shoes. Mrs. Brennan, could we speak privately? Sean appeared out of nowhere, inserting himself between us. James, I told you on the phone, Jane's not well. She's been making all these wild accusations. I'd like to hear from Mrs. Brennan directly, Sean, James said firmly. She's having delusions. Ask anyone in town. I've known Jane since she was a teenager. I knew her father. I think I can judge her mental state for myself. Sean's jaw clenched, but he couldn't physically stop a bank officer from speaking to me. James walked with me to the far paddock, well out of Sean's earshot. The paperwork for this supposed sale, he said quietly. It doesn't look right. The signature, the price, none of it makes any sense. Your father would roll over in his grave if I let someone steal what he provided for you. He handed me a business card with his private cell number on it. Call me, not the bank's main line. Me directly. Something's very wrong here. Wednesday afternoon, I needed some supplies from town. At Thompson's Western Wear, I was comparing prices on hay nets when I heard Michelle's voice carrying across the store. I need the finest equipment. Cost is no object. The ranch is generating plenty of income. She was standing at the counter, her arms piled high with premium leather goods, a $3,000 saddle, crystal-studded bridles, designer riding boots she'd destroy in one real day of ranch work. I'm converting the whole operation, she told the clerk, loud enough for the whole store to hear. Those smelly quarter horses are going. I'm bringing in Arabians, much more elegant for the luxury retreat I'm planning. Those smelly quarter horses, whose bloodlines I'd spent 20 years perfecting, horses that had won championships, produced champions, and saved troubled kids in our therapy riding program. She spotted me by the hay nets, and her smile spread across her face like spilled oil. Oh, Lily, still shopping here? She held up the saddle. Sean says you never could appreciate the finer things. Always too practical, too basic. I said nothing. Gary Thompson, the owner, walked over to ring up her purchases. He ran her credit card once, then twice, then handed it back to her. Declined, he said flatly. That's impossible. Try it again. Ma'am, it's declined. Do you have another form of payment? Michelle's face flushed a deep crimson. This is ridiculous. I own the Brennan Ranch. The Brennan Ranch account is in Jane's name, Gary said, looking directly at me. Has been for 20 years. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, lady, but it's not going to work in here. She stormed out, leaving the pile of expensive tack on the counter. Gary just winked at me and went back to his office. Thursday started with a pressure in my chest, like someone was sitting on my ribs. By noon, the pain was spreading down my left arm. Queen found me gripping a stall door, trying to breathe through it. Hospital, now. No, it's just stress. It's a heart attack waiting to happen. Get in the damn truck. The emergency room was too bright, too loud. They hooked me up to machines that beeped and blinked accusations about my blood pressure, my heart rate, my stress levels. The doctor, a young woman who looked like she could be Ashley's age, frowned at the readings. You need to rest. Whatever is happening in your life, it needs to take a back seat to your health. Horses don't feed themselves, I said. They also can't feed themselves if you're dead. Sean never showed up, but somehow, within hours, half the town knew I'd been hospitalized. His version of the story spread faster than a Texas wildfire. Poor Jane's having a complete breakdown, had to be sedated. Ashley arrived as they were preparing my discharge papers, her face tight with fury. Dad's telling everyone you're psychotic. Let him talk. My phone buzzed. It was Denzel. Jane, the judge reviewed everything. We have an emergency hearing scheduled for Monday. Can you make it? I looked at the IV in my arm, the monitors recording my every heartbeat, my daughter's worried face. I'll be there. Good, he said, because this ends Monday, one way or another. The nurse protested when I insisted on leaving. You need observation. I need to go home. You don't understand the risk. I understand it perfectly, I said. But that ranch has been my life for 20 years. If I'm going to have a heart attack, I'd rather have it there than in here. Ashley drove me back in silence. As we pulled up to the barn, the new colt was playing in the paddock, testing out his new legs with pure, unadulterated joy. Midnight Star watched him protectively, occasionally calling him back when he strayed too far. "Mom," Ashley said softly, "whatever happens Monday, I'm with you." I squeezed her hand, watching that colt dance on legs that were still learning their purpose. 5 more days of waiting, 5 more days of letting Sean and Michelle think they'd won. The weight of it all sat on my chest, heavier than any heart condition. But that colt gave me hope. New life always does. The trap is set. Everything comes down to this moment. If you're as ready as I am to watch Jane get the justice she deserves, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You are not going to want to miss the fallout from this. This is your last chance to be on the right side of this story before it ends. Monday arrived wrapped in low clouds that promised rain. I called Sean that morning, my voice carefully neutral. "I'm ready to discuss terms, peacefully, tonight, 7 p.m., at the Sterling Room." There was a pause. I could hear Michelle whispering excitedly in the background. "Terms?" His voice was full of suspicion. "There's nothing to discuss. The sale is done." "Then consider it a farewell dinner, for closure. Bring Michelle. She should be there." Another pause, more whispering. "Fine," he finally said, "but no drama, Jane." "No drama," I agreed. I got to the Sterling Room, a high-end steakhouse downtown, at 6:30. I chose a table near the window where the entire dining room would have a clear line of sight. The maitre d', Robert, who'd served our anniversary dinners for 15 years, raised an eyebrow when I just requested water, not wine. "Celebrating tonight, Mrs. Brennan?" "In a way, Robert. In a way." Denzel had arrived even earlier, positioning himself at the bar with his briefcase, nursing a club soda while pretending to read the Wall Street Journal. Detective Rachel Morrison from the Financial Crimes Unit sat in a corner booth, just another diner enjoying a quiet soup and salad. And David Park, the investigator, had a small table by the kitchen entrance. Strategic positioning, he'd called it. At exactly 7 o'clock, they arrived. Michelle was wearing a tight black dress that was trying way too hard, and around her neck were my grandmother's pearls, the ones Sean had claimed were stolen during our move last year. Seeing them on her throat made my hands tighten on my water glass, but I kept my expression pleasant. "Jane," Sean said, pulling out Michelle's chair with an exaggerated flourish, "you look tired." "Hospital stays will do that to you," I replied evenly. They ordered a bottle of Veuve Clicquot champagne, charging it to what they assumed was their new ranch account. Robert's eyes flicked to mine. I gave him the slightest nod. Let them order whatever they wanted. "To new beginnings," Sean said, raising his glass, that smirk I'd once found charming, now just looking cruel. "To endings," I countered, lifting my water. "And to the truth." Michelle giggled, a sound as sharp as breaking glass. "The truth? That's rich, considering you've been living in denial for weeks." "Have I?" "Let's discuss the truth then, like the truth about the Derby party 2 years ago." Sean's champagne glass stopped halfway to his lips. "You kept refilling my wine that night," I continued conversationally. "I thought you were just being attentive, but you needed me drunk, didn't you? For the papers. You thought they were property transfer documents, but you were drunk too, Sean. You signed a post-nuptial agreement instead, the one that guarantees the ranch stays mine in case of a divorce." Michelle's giggle died in her throat. "That's not possible." "Then there's the storage unit," I went on. 6 months of rent, all those falsified breeding records, the love letters going back 2 years. I pulled out my phone and swiped to the cloud account. "And your texts are particularly interesting, Michelle." I hit play on a voice message she'd sent Sean 3 weeks ago. Her recorded voice filled the space between us, sharp and clear. "Just forge her signature already. She's too stupid to fight back. Once we file it, she'll just roll over like she always does." Diners at the nearby tables turned to stare. Michelle lunged for my phone, but I pulled it back. "Delete that!" "Why? It's my phone, my cloud account, my evidence." Sean stood up abruptly. "We're leaving." "I don't think so." Denzel approached our table with 3 thick folders, walking with the practiced stride of a man who was about to legally destroy 2 people's lives. Mr. Brennan, Ms. Hawthorne, I'm Denzel Washington, Mrs. Brennan's attorney. We know who you are, Sean spat. Then you'll want to see these documents. Denzel placed the first folder on the table. The irrevocable trust that's protected the ranch for the last 6 weeks. Any sale without Mrs. Brennan's explicit, notarized consent is legally void. But since you filed a fraudulent document, that brings us to folder number 2. He opened it, revealing bank statements, falsified vet bills, altered breeding records. $400,000 in embezzlement over 3 years. That's a federal crime, Mr. Brennan. Michelle shrank back in her chair. I didn't know about any. Your signature is on several of these deposit slips, Ms. Hawthorne, Denzel noted calmly. And then there's folder 3, the IRS issue. What IRS issue? Michelle's voice climbed an octave. Your $5 purchase price. The IRS considers that a gift, not a sale, which means you owe gift tax on the full market value of the property, approximately $600,000 due immediately. That's insane, Sean stammered. Detective Morrison had left her booth and was approaching our table with the measured, unhurried pace of law enforcement. Mr. Brennan, Ms. Hawthorne, I'm Detective Morrison with the Financial Crimes Unit. The entire restaurant was now watching, forks suspended midway to mouths, conversations dead. Even the kitchen staff were peering through the service window. This is entrapment, Sean's voice cracked. No, sir, the detective said. Entrapment would be if we convinced you to commit crimes you wouldn't have otherwise committed. You did all of this on your own. Michelle's carefully applied makeup began to run in black streams down her face. You said it was legal. You said she was pathetic, that she'd never fight back. Shut up, Michelle. Don't you tell me to shut up. This is your fault, your plan, your lies. She stood up, grabbing her purse. I'm calling my lawyer. Ma'am, please remain seated, Detective Morrison said firmly. You can't make me. Actually, I can. You're both being detained pending an investigation into fraud, conspiracy, and the filing of false legal documents. The maitre d' approached apologetically. Perhaps we should move this to a more private space? No need, Robert, I said quietly. They're leaving. Detective Morrison nodded to 2 uniformed officers who had been waiting just outside the main doors. They entered with the quiet efficiency of professionals, standing directly behind Sean and Michelle's chairs. Mr. Brennan, you're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent. Jane, please. Sean turned to me, his confidence finally shattering. We were married for 18 years. Doesn't that mean anything? It meant everything, I replied, until you decided it meant nothing at all. As they were being let out, Michelle's shriek pierced the restaurant's stunned silence. This is your fault, Sean. You said she was too stupid to protect herself. The dining room remained frozen for a few seconds after they were gone. Then, slowly, the normal sounds of dinner began to resume, quieter now, charged with the electricity of having witnessed real-life drama. Robert approached with a slice of chocolate cake I hadn't ordered. On the house, Mrs. Brennan. That was quite a show. Denzel sat down across from me, allowing himself a small, satisfied smile. The ranch is safe. The criminal charges will stick, and the IRS will definitely be wanting their money from Ms. Hawthorne. What about the $5? I asked. Evidence, he chuckled, though I doubt she'll want it back. I took a bite of the cake, dark chocolate with a raspberry filling. It was the first thing I'd truly tasted in weeks. Around me, other diners tried not to stare, but I caught several sympathetic nods, a few raised glasses, and a quiet salute. Detective Morrison returned briefly. We'll need you to come to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement. Of course. After she left, I sat alone at the table where Sean had proposed to me 20 years ago, the same table where we'd celebrated Ashley's acceptance to college. Now, it would be remembered as the place where his entire house of lies had finally collapsed. The champagne they'd ordered still sat in its bucket, barely touched. Robert cleared it away without asking, along with any trace that they had ever been there at all. I left the restaurant through the kitchen exit, avoiding the clusters of diners who were still buzzing about what they'd just witnessed. The drive home felt different. Not lighter, not yet, but shifted, like that moment between a crack of thunder and the start of the rain, when the pressure finally breaks. Tuesday morning arrived with an official summons. Courthouse, 9 a.m. sharp. I dressed carefully. Not fancy, just respectable. The navy blue suit I'd worn to my father's funeral, pressed but not new. Ashley met me on the courthouse steps, her face drawn but determined. You don't have to come in, I told her. Yes, I do, she said. I need to see this through. The courtroom smelled of old wood and floor polish. Sean sat at the defendant's table in an Orange County jumpsuit that made him look smaller, older. Michelle was beside him in street clothes, her attorney whispering urgently in her ear. The assistant district attorney, a sharp woman named Sophia Clean, stood with the easy confidence of someone holding a royal flush. She began methodically laying out the evidence, like dealing cards face up on a table. Your Honor, we have documented proof of systematic embezzlement spanning 3 years. Bank statements appeared on the overhead screen. $400,000 diverted through fraudulent veterinary bills. Sean's lawyer, a tired-looking man named Peterson, objected. This alleged evidence was obtained through entrapment. Mrs. Brennan deliberately. Objection overruled. The judge cut him off. The defendant's crimes began long before Mrs. Brennan took any protective action. Continue, Ms. Clean. The forged signatures came next, side-by-side comparisons that were so bad they were almost laughable. Then came the messages from the cloud account, each one more damning than the last. The defendants discussed their plan in detail, Sophia explained, highlighting specific texts. Get her drunk enough to sign anything. She's too trusting to check the paperwork. Once it's filed, she can't fight it. Michelle's attorney, a man named Garrett, stood up abruptly. Your Honor, may I have a moment with my client? They huddled together for a few moments. When Garrett returned to the podium, his shoulders were slumped in defeat. Your Honor, Ms. Hawthorne would like to discuss a plea arrangement. Abandoning ship already? The judge asked dryly. The evidence is overwhelming. Sean twisted in his chair to glare at Michelle, but she refused to meet his eyes. The prosecution calls Ashley Brennan, Sophia announced. My daughter walked to the stand with her chin held high, though her hands trembled as she took the oath. She looked directly at me, not her father, as she began to speak. He called me at school, constantly, said Mom was having a breakdown, that I needed to come home and convince her to sign some papers. He promised he would pay my tuition if I helped him. And did you believe him? Sophia asked gently. At first, Ashley's voice cracked. He's my father. Why would he lie? But then I came home and my mom showed me the evidence. The forged signatures, the stolen money, the texts calling my mother stupid. What else did you discover? Ashley's jaw tightened. I went to his apartment last week to get some of my childhood things. Michelle was there. She was wearing my grandmother's jewelry, pieces Dad had told me were stolen, and there were photos from their trips together, from times when he was supposedly away at business conferences. Sean's attorney tried a cross-examination. Isn't it true you're just angry at your father for the divorce? I'm angry that he tried to steal from the woman who actually raised me while he was running around with his girlfriend, Ashley shot back. Objection! It's not an objection if it's true, she retorted. The judge allowed himself a small, fleeting smile. When Ashley stepped down, she walked right past Sean's table without a single glance and sat beside me, taking my hand. More witnesses followed. James Whitman from the bank explained the suspicious paperwork. David Park, the investigator, presented the audio recordings from the house. Doc Miller testified about the forged veterinary bills. By the afternoon, both defense attorneys looked utterly defeated. Sean's last-ditch effort was to take the stand himself. Jane and I built that ranch together, he claimed, his voice pleading. I have a right to... Mr. Brennan, the judge interrupted, his voice sharp as glass. Did you or did you not forge your wife's signature on a deed transfer? She would have signed if... Yes or no? Sean's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Yes. And did you steal $400,000 through fraudulent billing? A long, painful pause. Yes. The judge turned to Michelle. Ms. Hawthorne, you are facing charges of conspiracy, fraud, and filing false documents. How do you plead? Michelle stood up slowly, her mascara already running. Guilty, Your Honor. The sentencing was swift. Sean received 18 months in a minimum security prison for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. Michelle got 2 years of probation and restitution requirements that would drain her accounts for years. The IRS penalties alone would force her into bankruptcy. The property known as Brennan Ranch, the judge declared, is hereby confirmed as the sole and legal property of Mrs. Jane Brennan. All fraudulent liens are cleared. Any and all claims by the defendants are permanently void. The gavel fell with a loud final crack. Outside on the courthouse steps, Queen was waiting with a surprise. She had Midnight Star's black colt on a lead rope. "Thought he should see his home is really safe," she said, smiling. The colt nuzzled my hand, searching for treats. It was such a simple, innocent gesture, but it broke something loose inside my chest. Not tears, those would come later. Just a wave of relief so profound my knees nearly buckled. Word traveled through town faster than a blue norther. Within hours, George Murphy had hung a handwritten sign in his store window. "We stand with Jane Brennan, real rancher, real woman." My phone buzzed with messages. The Hendersons, "Never doubted you for a second." The Wilkins family. "Can we resume training next week?" Even Martha Henderson, who'd whispered about me in the feed store. "I'm so sorry. I should have known better." A photographer from the local paper showed up, wanting a picture for their story. I stood with the colt while Ashley held his lead rope. The headline would read, "Local Rancher Defeats Fraud Scheme." That evening, the casseroles started arriving. Tuna noodle from the Pattersons, lasagna from the Church ladies, more food than Ashley and I could eat in a month. Each dish was a silent apology from people who'd chosen the wrong side. "You don't need their approval," Queen said, helping me unload the fourth casserole delivery. "I know," I said, "but it's nice to have it back." Sean would serve his 18 months. Michelle was already packing her bags to leave town, her social media accounts deleted, her dreams of being a ranch owner dissolved into a nightmare of legal fees and tax penalties. And me? I stood in my kitchen, looking out at my land, my horses, my life, fully restored. The black colt played in the pasture, his legs still a little unsteady, but growing stronger every day. Tomorrow I'd return to my normal routine, 4:30 a.m. Wake up, coffee, barn chores. But tonight I would allow myself this one moment of victory. Justice had been served, and it was delicious. 6 months can change everything, or maybe it just reveals what was always there, waiting underneath the crisis. This morning, I stood on my porch with a cup of coffee that tasted like freedom, watching the sun paint the familiar pastures in a new, brilliant light. The horses grazed in patterns I knew by heart, but something was different. They seemed easier, less skittish. Animals sense tension in ways humans try to ignore. They knew, long before I did, that the danger had finally passed. Queen emerged from the barn, no longer just my employee, but my partner. We'd made it official last month, a 60-40 split, with her taking the 40 and the option to buy in further over time. "The therapy kids arrive at 9, she called out. "We've got 6 today." The therapeutic riding program, my dream for a decade, and Sean's veto for just as long. A waste of resources, he'd called it, a liability nightmare. Now twice a week, children with disabilities came to find strength and confidence on horseback. Their parents paid what they could, insurance covered some, and we absorbed the rest. Some things were just more important than profit. Ashley's truck rumbled up the drive. She'd transferred from her expensive out-of-state college to the state school just an hour away. Closer to home, she'd said, but I knew the truth. She wanted to be near the horses, near the healing. On weekends, she worked alongside us, learning the business from the ground up. "Mail's here," she said, tossing a bundle on the porch rail, "including something from Coleman Correctional." Sean's careful, blocky handwriting on the envelope. I'd gotten 3 others over the past few months, all unopened, all tossed directly into the burn barrel. This one, I opened. Not out of curiosity, but from a need to confirm what I already knew. "Jane," it began, "I wake up every day in a concrete box and remember the wooden walls you and I built together. I hear metal doors slamming shut and remember the barn door that always stuck until you fixed it with some cooking oil and a little patience. They serve instant coffee here that tastes like regret." He went on for pages, talking about the morning routines he missed, the smell of hay, the sound of thunder's pride whinnying at dawn. He wrote about how he had destroyed everything real for something that turned out to be nothing but smoke. "I know you'll never forgive me, and you shouldn't, but I need you to know that I understand now what I lost, what I threw away, what I tried to steal but never actually owned. I read it through once, then walked over to the burn barrel where we dispose of medical waste and expired feed. The paper caught fire quickly, his words turning to black ash that lifted and disappeared on the morning breeze. Some apologies just come too late to matter. Some bridges, once burned, leave gaps that should never be crossed again." "From Dad?" Ashley asked, watching the last of it disappear. "From a stranger who used to live here. She nodded, understanding. We'd had months of therapy together, unpacking the manipulation, the divided loyalties, the grief of losing the father she thought she knew. She was learning what I'd finally learned. Sometimes the hardest person to forgive is yourself, for not seeing the truth sooner. Later that afternoon, a new ranch sign was delivered, one Queen and Ashley had commissioned as a surprise. Second Chances Ranch, it read in black wrought iron, with a silhouette of a running horse beneath it. It wasn't for Sean. He'd had his chances and burned every last one of them. This was for the therapy kids who were told they'd never walk, finding freedom on the back of a horse. For the rescued animals we'd given one more opportunity to matter. And for women like me, who learned that starting over at 45 wasn't an ending, but a new beginning. I'd heard through the small-town grapevine that Michelle had moved back east somewhere, working as a receptionist at a law firm, ironically, and still paying off the IRS in installments that would follow her for the next decade. Her Instagram dreams of ranch life were deleted, replaced by the harsh reality of consequences. As evening approached, I walked out to Midnight Star's pasture. Her colt, now 6 months old and officially named Justice, trotted over on legs that had found their strength. He'd never known the fear that had lived here during those awful weeks. To him, this place had only ever been safe, steady, and sure. "You were born into the storm," I told him, rubbing his neck. "But look at you now." He nudged my pocket, searching for carrots with the single-minded determination of youth. Behind him, the sun set over land that had been paid for twice. Once with my father's life insurance, and again with my refusal to let it be stolen. My phone buzzed with tomorrow's schedule from Queen. 8 therapy students, a vet visit for vaccinations, a meeting with a potential sponsor for the therapy program. Life, finally moving forward, instead of constantly defending against an attack from behind. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, mine alone now, with a cup of tea and the comfortable, bone-deep quiet of a house that held no secrets, no lies, no betrayals waiting to surface. Through the window, I could see the barn security light illuminating the path I'd walk tomorrow at 4:30 a.m. Same as always, except nothing was the same. Everything was better, cleaner, truer, $5. That's what they thought my life's work was worth. But you can't buy what was never for sale, and you can't steal what someone is willing to fight for. The silence of my evening wasn't lonely. It was earned, it was peaceful, and it was completely, unequivocally